Thank you very much, Pauline, for that wonderful brief introduction. We've got 5 minutes left for the whole show, and I'm going to share it equitably, absolutely fairly, with my co-presenter here and my dear friend Ron McCallum. I'm going to speak on LGBTIQ issues. Ron is going to speak on disability issues, but every now and again we may stray into each other's territory. And I'm very glad that Affinity has brought us together and brought us together with you. Thank you all very much for coming. I pay my respects to the Indigenous people of our continental country, and I pay my respects to all the people who are connected with Affinity. Two terrible things happened yesterday. One of them was a speech in the Australian Senate. It was a speech given by a senator of the Commonwealth of Australia. He was a new senator, and maybe he didn't know the conventions, but he immediately launched into some very intemperate and ill-advised words, including mentioning that the Islamic people in Australia should go home. What his solution was for those who were born in Australia, I don't know, because this is their home, and that we don't want you, and also that we should find the final solution for the problem of the Islamic people in Australia. Last night I went to the Sydney Jewish Museum. I had to introduce a new program that they have started at the Sydney Jewish Museum, which is looking to the future and seeking to examine issues that are illustrated and extended from the wonderful exhibition there on the Shoah, on the Holocaust. And I have to tell you that they were really shocked that anybody in this day and age could refer to those fateful words which were designated at the meeting in Wannsee near Berlin in the first part of the Second World War to find the final solution for the Jewish people in Europe. Mr. Katter, the head of the party of this senator, said that he wasn't a man well versed in books. He didn't know what those words meant, but in any case he thought it was a golden speech, a wonderful speech, and he didn't have to know what those words meant, and he would not be recommending that he bones up on the final solution. So that was not a good day for representative democracy in Australia. Fortunately, it attracted such a sense of outrage and shock that it hasn't had a lot of publicity in today's newspapers and media. I mean, not the publicity it should have got for such an ignorant statement against the background of the history of the 20th century, which doesn't seem to have percolated into the mind of this elected senator of the Commonwealth. So that was a very horrible incident, and it's disturbing, and in a sense we are here gathered because we have an absolutely different view of our world and of our country. But another horrible thing happened yesterday. In Kabul, in Afghanistan, young students, male and female, were approaching their final tests, and a bomb was detonated amongst them, and 40 beautiful young Afghans were murdered. And that appears to have been done by people who could not tolerate the fact that they were doing their studies together, and that they were filling their minds with education. This was something intolerable to those who set off that bomb. And that was a very horrible thing. And it's a very frightening thing, because everybody who's known young people knows that they're full of the love of the world and the hopes for their future. And so I feel a great sense of distress at the fact that there are people in our world who will do this kind of thing to innocent young people. What could be going on in their minds? What could be their idea of a loving God? What could be their notions of spirituality and religion, if that was what motivated that action? So yesterday was not a particularly nice day. I know Koppel. When I was 30, soon after meeting my partner Johan from the Netherlands, a Netherlands Australian, we drove in a combi van overland. So we went through all those lands. We went through India, we went through Pakistan, we went through Afghanistan, we went through Iran under the Shah, we went through Turkey. Johan wanted to go to Turkey. He said Mustafa Kemal Atatürk, was a truly great man. He was the hope of that part of the world. He saw the importance of a lesson that we in Australia fundamentally learned from the British. The British didn't do everything right, but some things they did do right. And the separation of church and state, of religion and public affairs, was a very beautiful gift that the British gave us and is inscribed in our constitution, but more importantly, it's part of our culture and our beliefs in Australia. And Johan said, we must learn more about Atatürk, and in particular, we must learn that he defeated the Aussies at Anzac. And so we went through Turkey. This is long before these big expeditions of Aussie tourists went there. There was nothing really there, just Cape Helles, and you could look down at Suvla Bay, where the British had landed and the French, and at Anzac Cove, where the Australians and New Zealanders landed, and across the Hellespont to where Troy, ancient Troy, was built, and where Xerxes built the bridge to cross the Hellespont on the way to conquer Greece. It was a marvellous experience, and there we read Alan Moorhead's book on the Anzac campaign, and we learned what a brilliant general Atatürk was. But there are plenty of brilliant generals. Atatürk was more than a brilliant general, he was a very great civic leader. And I think it's appropriate on this occasion in an organisation, Affinity, which was essentially founded by people with a Turkish background. That is a gift to Australia, that they should found this organisation. And I think if Atatürk were around today, he would thoroughly approve. People reaching out, seeking to understand each other, and in particular in countries of the book, the Christians, the Jews and Islam, to understand the links that exist between us and the importance of building on those links. Now, I don't have a lot of time to speak about LGBT issues because when you were sitting here anxiously and hungrily waiting for us to attend, we were in a big feast next door at the great expense of Affinity, tucking into the most gorgeous meal that was laid before us. And so with the big introduction, my long introduction, and that big feast, we don't have a lot of time. But I want to tell you some basic facts. When I was growing up, I suppose I would have been about 11, I discovered that I was gay. I discovered that, and it wasn't a nice discovery at the time, because I knew you had to be thoroughly and completely ashamed of yourself. And so much so that you couldn't even tell the people who you loved most of all, your parents, your siblings, my grandmother. You had to keep it all bottled up, and somehow at the age of 11, tossing and turning and crying on your pillow to work it all out for yourself. And I knew that the law at that time in Australia was horrible and locked people up. And every second week there was a big story about police who had trapped some poor unfortunate gay person, and their photos were on the front of the paper, and it was a terrible thing. And that was how Australia was in those days. And there were still people who fought against that and didn't want to change it, and there are still people in Australia. Mary Crock showed me at lunchtime, it really ruined my lunch, Mary, a story of a Baptist religious group in Sydney, Australia today, in the here and now, who are teaching in scripture classes in public schools that gay people are evil and will go to hell and should be killed. I mean, this is amazing to me as a strong supporter of public schools. What happens in private and religious schools, I don't know. But in public schools, there has to be a space for everybody, whatever their religion, whatever their ethnicity, whatever their gender, and whatever their sexuality. And I really think that is shocking. And it was discovered by the Sydney Morning Herald asking questions about it. And they've changed their website in the meantime. But if that's what they're teaching, that's not what I learned in Scripture. I learned about the love of God and the beauty of my religion and reaching out and reconciliation. But anyway, that's what's going on at the moment. Now, there is a big problem with Christianity and with Judaism and with Islam in respect of homosexuality. And that worried me when I was a very young boy, but at the same time, by sheer chance, there were big reports in all the Australian newspapers about the research of Alfred Kinsey. This is a scientist. He was the world's biggest expert on bees. His expertise was gall wasps. He had the most amazing collection of gall wasps, millions of them. And he was studying bees and their sexual and other habits. And then he thought, oh, I wonder what humans get up to. And so he started to study human beings. And he discovered about the common existence of homosexuality, that it's just a variation in nature, and that it is not huge, but it's significant. There are more homosexuals in this world than there are Jews. And it's a significant proportion of any population, probably full-time, lifelong, dedicated LGBTIQ, probably about 5%. And it exists in Arab countries, it exists in Islamic countries, it exists everywhere. My brother Donald was left-handed. My sister Diana was red-headed. I was gay. And if you have a problem with it, I'm very sorry. I'm very sorry you have a problem with it, but you just got to get over it. It's not going to disappear. People are not going to suddenly give up. You can't change it, and you can't stamp it out. And it's very cruel of you to be nasty to, especially to young kids. I can stand up for myself, and I can give as good as I get. But little kids in Blacktown getting this message in Scripture in a public school, it's monstrous and outrageous and has to change. We will change all this in Australia. We've got better. Definitely in my lifetime, we've got much better. My partner and I, after 50 years, we're still thinking about marriage. Johan says it's far too early to tell. But we may well do it. We're thinking we might do it on the 11th of February 2019, which is exactly 50 years since we met. And that would be a sort of appropriate type thing. But boy, that was really fought. That was fought, and in my own church, the wonderful Anglican Church, which is a temperate church, has always had to accommodate the Protestant side of the church and the Catholic side of the Anglican Church. They, in the last weeks of the campaign on the marriage per survey, the Anglican Church spent $5,000 on family violence and $1 million on the No campaign in the church. I want to pay a public tribute here, and I hope it won't embarrass him, probably will ruin his career, to Andrew Semple, who is in the back here. He is the priest at St James Church. He is a true person of God's mercy and love, and he has in his church, you come in, they say, we are a church who are here for everybody, and we're here for people of different ethnicity, aboriginality and so on, and lesbians, gays and so on. And that's what you get when you go to St James. So thank you, Andrew. You are my idea of an Anglican, of a Christian, of a person of the book. And I really honour you and thank you for being here today. So, that's basically all I came to tell you. We exist, sorry, we are there, we're not going to go away, you can't change us, we can't change us, and you just can be cruel and nasty, but we won't disappear and we'll just keep popping up. And now, the young people will speak up and they won't accept it. And that will include in the Islamic countries. And I can tell you, one young Islamic boy came to see me. He's got a significant job in the New South Wales Public Service. And he told me he's too frightened to tell his parents. He doesn't know what to do, didn't know where to go. Well, I knew that the editor of the gay newspaper in Sydney had been a gay man. From Egypt, and I put him in touch with him, but he's still too frightened to do anything because of his family and his parents and how the reaction is and would be. So these are the realities with Islamic young gays in Sydney, Australia, 2018. And it is unscientific, it is unkind, and we've got to somehow change it. And I hope that Affinity, by having this talk today, can begin a journey that we can have a modern discussion, and that in that sense, Australia, the multinational, multicultural country, can make a contribution back for all the glories of Islamic gifts to us. We can give this a scientific message into the Islamic community, a reciprocal message that says this is just part of the variations of nature. It's not a big deal, and if it's in nature, it has a purpose. It has nature's purpose, and therefore we've just got to get used to it. Okay, I'd like to pay tribute to one other man who's here today. Peter, what's your surname? Yeah, his wife is about to be delivered of their first child. And I said to him, you must take lots of photos and capture all these glorious, magical moments. And it's wonderful that you're here today. No progress was ever made on gay issues without the support of straight people who can see the world, see the science, and see kindness and love of one another, which is essentially what's at the essence of all the great religions of the book. Thank you.